Well, the biggest response, the most widely respected response to the Turing test is a guy by the name of John Searle. He objected, suggesting that what a computer was doing was not actually thinking. That in order to have thought, he said, it has to be more than just processing of information. There has to be comprehension of it. And what Searle suggested was he suggested an analogy very similar to the first one, but in this one he called it the Chinese room. And he said, suppose you have a very elaborate book of Chinese characters, and on one of the mail slots in the Turing test, there is a Chinese speaker who can write and speak in Chinese and can write back in Chinese whatever the person sends them a message. And the other room is a monoglot English speaker, somebody who only speaks English. They know no other language but English, and that's all they know. And so he says, suppose that person was on the other side, but that person has been given this huge book. Now, this book is very small, but they've been given this huge book that in it has every possible conversation, sentence, statement that could be given in Chinese, and it gives a way to respond. So what happens is you get through a symbol, a couple of Chinese of the graph, the script from Chinese, and you look it up in there, you follow it, and you see, okay, here's that one, and it says write this one, and then here's another one, and write this one in response. But this is a huge book, but somehow this person's super capable of following it very quickly. Well, what Searle says is, suppose the person could do this so well from the Chinese characters that it would give them what to write back, and they could do it. Maybe we could think about a conversation or a computer that it was processing this information in this way, that according to Turing, he said, you would have to conclude both of them are thinking, even though all one is doing is thinking in Chinese, is what he says, is they're actually thinking and processing the information in Chinese and performing an intelligible conversation. But what Searle says, he says, no. All that the person, the English speaker, has done is performed a syntactical operation. They have received a statement in Chinese and performed and given back a syntactically equivalent answer that will satisfy the person. Whereas what the other person is doing, what the Chinese speaker who has taken it, read it, understood it, and processed it back, has performed a semantic operation. The difference between syntax and semantics is syntax is the format of language in a way that's intelligible. So, for example, where you put a comma, or where you put a to, or what type of to, or there versus THEIR versus THERE, or its ITS versus IT apostrophe S. Those are syntactically, there's a right and there's a wrong. But what happens is then there's semantics, which is the meaning that comes from those differences. For example, I always like to use the example from my father-in-law when he used to have a sign on his house, at his house behind the toilet, that said, "We aim to please." T.O., we aim to please, and then it had a picture of a little boy peeing or whatever, and it said, from behind or whatever, and it said, you aim to please, T-O-O, you aim to please. So instead of, we aim to please, you aim to please, you aim to please. So all it is a zero, is an extra zero, is extra O that makes the difference between those two statements. And so they're syntactically different. And you could get those and syntactically say something, but do you understand why those are different? There's a semantic difference in those two statements. And some things, for example, with that's a very simple syntactical, and most of us understand. But there are differences, in how you say, like, for example, if, where you put a comma or how you do it, that there are very subtle differences that, as you learn the English language better and better, you realize make very big semantic differences. And so what happens is what Searle suggests that a computer at best can be found to perform syntactical operations, but a computer will never perform semantic operations because it can only be programmed to do syntax. It cannot be programmed to do semantics. Well, is a reasonable statement. I think he's got a decent point. But at the same time, I don't know. I mean, just because a computer may not comprehend in the same way, I don't know that it doesn't understand it. I don't know that you understand anything. I mean, I really don't know that. And so that's sort of the response. But that is probably the most respected. I do like Searle's argument, but I'm not sure that I'm completely convinced either way.